Welcome to the Healing Center Conversations podcast, where we create space for conversations that heal. I'm your host, Dr. Byron McClure, a nationally certified school psychologist. I, along with our special guests, will give you insight to promote collective healing by putting people first. Through weekly conversations with educators, psychologists, and healers, we'll discuss ways to heal, thrive, and live your best life. This is the Healing Center Conversations podcast. Welcome to the Healing Center Conversations podcast, where we create space for conversations that heal. I am your host, Dr. Byron McClure. Through weekly conversations with educators, psychologists, and healers, we discuss ways to heal, thrive, and live your best life. This is the Healing Center Conversations podcast. On today's show, we have a leading man, the leading equity, none other than Dr. Sheldon Eakins. Dr. Eakins is the founder of the Leading Equity Center and host of the Leading Equity podcast. With over 11 years in education, he has served as a teacher, principal, and director of special education. Dr. Eakins has a passion for helping educators accomplish equitable practices in their schools. He's earned a bachelor's degree in social science education, a master's degree in educational leadership, and a doctorate in K-12 education. This man is experienced, he's knowledgeable, but he's real. Welcome to the Healing Center Conversations podcast, my good brother.
Oh, man, Byron, thank you so much for having me. So I'm really excited for it. Congratulations on the podcast, man. I'm all about that life, man. Good stuff.
Thank you. We were joking. We were laughing a little bit earlier. Is it weird for you being on the other side? Typically, you're the host.
I told you, I had my notepad out and my pen. I was ready to take notes because I'm thinking I'm going to ask you a question. I totally forgot. I'm on the other side of the mic this time. So, yeah, that's always fun, too. Is because, I'm used to just interviewing, conversations, stuff like that. But just being able to someone else to ask me questions, just kind of know what I'm thinking is also helpful, too. It's fun.
Absolutely. And we're going to have some fun today. And before we get into it, man, I just want to check on you, see how you're doing. In our current climate and context, man, it's a lot that's happening, especially in the space of equity and education and misinformation. So, how are you, for real?
I'm much better. I'll put it that way. I've gone through a few personal things over the last year. And then, I walked away from my job from the school. I was just, what I do is Leading Equity Center. And it just got to the place where I just couldn't give 100% between going to my school every day and then doing the podcast stuff at night and in the mornings and weekends. It was a lot happening. So I'm in a much better place because I have one job and just my family dynamics has changed, but it's still manageable and it's something that I am, I guess, accustomed to at this point. So I am good. But like you said, the political climate and everything that we have going on regarding, I call it CRT. I call it critical race theory. The critical CRT to me is culturally responsible.
Absolutely.
And I just cannot get myself to form the CRT and support critical race theory, that whole mindset and ideology. That was brand new to me. I had never heard of it. I don't watch Fox News. And so I had to look it up because people were saying, hey, you're a critical race theorist. And I'm like, what the hell is, I don't know what that is. And I had to look it up and I do some research. And I'm like, no, that's not what I do.
Right.
I'm culturally responsive teacher.
Right.
I think to me at the end of the day, and this was a challenge I always had with this whole CRT, critical race theory, whatever, culture responsible, all that stuff. To me, it's can we all agree that we want our kids to be successful?
Absolutely.
Don't we, how is that a thing? Even the word equity is under fire a lot of times. And I just don't understand. We could say that we want our kids to be successful. We want the best for our students, but just don't use these terms and then you're fine. Because it seems to put pressure on certain people. It seems to threaten folks' superiority. And when that kind of thing is challenged, then you start to get all this pushback and bans of books and bans of this and ban of that. We can't even hardly have these kind of conversations anymore because it makes other people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And how have you kind of navigated those waters, especially since you're doing this? This is your work now.
I know, and that's a good question. How have I navigated? I'm always good with pivoting as a person who just like my goal is to supply educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. That's all I want to do. So whatever that looks like. So sometimes I'll have folks that I'm working with, like school districts or even schools, and they say, look, we want to do this work, but the name Annihilating Racial Injustice in Schools is a little harsh for our climate, but we want this work here. And I say, you know what? I don't care what you call it. You could call it Professional Development 101. I don't give a damn. It's going to be the same material. It's going to be the same concepts and the same ideas to support your educators, to support your staff, whoever it is, to, again, ensure that your students are going to get their individual needs being met. So I've asked, so I've had some folks say, hey, can we just change some of this language, some of the names or whatever it is, some of the titles of your workshop? I'm like, I don't care. That's fine with me, because my goal here is to help you so that you can help your students.
Yeah, and what's interesting, our work overlaps, especially in terms of equity, making sure that our students get what it is that they need, improving outcomes for our kids. And so when I'm doing these speaking engagements and workshops for different schools and districts, it's some of those similar conversations. And so it's this thing around language, right? And I think so much misinformation is happening, especially within this political climate, because people are confused around language. So is that something that it sounds like you're easily adapting to the change in language? Like
you have to.
Yeah. Is that
you have to adapt, because if you're rigid, I mean that's what equity is, right? Equality is what? Giving everybody the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So if I wasn't willing to change, if I wasn't willing to work with folks, or then I'm not, how am I calling myself the equity person? Or this is what I do. This is what I live and breathe, but then I'm not actually doing it or living it myself. To me, it doesn't make any sense. So you have to be willing to make those adjustments. You have to be willing to adapt. You have to be willing to recognize, you know what? Here's a space that I want to enter into. However, here's some of the protocols. Here's some of the dynamics that are already in place. If I come in here with my own stuff and my own ideas and just like, here I am, I'm supposed to be the one that's going to, change your life, without really having some sort of humbleness and just say, where are we at? Where are you at? Let me learn from you. And then I can teach you what I know. And here's my thoughts, and we can kind of work together. But if you're not willing to adjust, you're going to have problems.
Yeah. And so I'm hearing adaptability is key, being able to still get the content out, but being able to adapt and pivot is important, especially so they get this work, because either way they're gonna get this work. And so before we get too deep into it, Sheldon, I would love for you to just explain to the listeners, who is Sheldon Eakins?
Who is Sheldon Eakins? Sheldon Eakins is a educator. I'm a dad. I got 2 kids. I am one of those people that wants to know a little bit about everything. I'm very nerdy, I love reading books. I love to, I was just talking to my daughter the other day, this week, we're because she seems very inquisitive as I am. So we'll talk about stuff. And for example, I was just like, I was randomly just looking at people's heights. I was just Googling, how tall is The Rock? The Rock is 6'4". How tall is Kevin Hart? Kevin Hart is 5'2". I just randomly I didn't know.
So he's really short.
He's 5'2". He is 5'2". Brother's 5'2". So, but I didn't I'm one of those kind of dudes. I just randomly Google stuff that I just don't know. I'm I'm curious. And then it's in my bank now. I know. So let's just say we're randomly having a conversation, and maybe Kevin Hart's latest movie, I could throw in there, hey, did you know Kevin Hart was 5'2"? Or, hey, did you know that The Rock is 6'4"? I have that stat. Right? Not I'm one of those dudes that has those weird facts. That's me. I am very playful, but I am very introverted. I am extreme.
But you have a podcast.
Introvert.
You've been a principal and a school leader.
I know. People never believe me. They never believe me. Every time I tell, I said, man, I'm very shy. Folks will be like, nah, not you, shut it. But here's the thing. You said, yeah, but you have a podcast. Okay. Podcast episode 1. I had that scripted. I recorded it about 10 times.
Wow.
And it was literally word for word. Everything I said, I didn't even want to listen to it. I just, do I want to release this and publish this out to the world? I debated whether or not I was going to do that as well. It has taken me literally 3 years to get to a place where now I could just hit record. I might have an outline, but it's not scripted anymore. These are the topics. These are the points I want to hit on. And I just go, I hit record. Now, I remember I was in eighth grade. I used to teach social studies for eighth graders, and the school that I was at, they had a graduation for eighth graders. So when they go on from eighth grade on to high school, and they asked me to be their graduation speaker. And I turned them down. This was about, 7, 8 years ago. I turned them down. I said, no. And my ex-wife at the time, she said, you need to go in there and tell them, yes, do this stuff, man. And so if it wasn't for that encouragement, I came back the next day and say, all right, listen, can I still be your speaker? And they were like, oh yeah, definitely. But that was and I remember being on stage, and again, I had that scripted too. I had that written out word for word, exactly what I'm going to say for my graduation speech. And I remember reading it out, and I got lost in the middle of my speech, and I was looking up, looking around. You see all the crowd, all this family and friends. I'm looking at the students on the stage, and I almost walked off. I just got to that place where I was like, oh, I'm so lost. I don't know where I am. I'm nervous. I almost sat down, and I don't know. I just said, look, pause, take a second, deep breath, find where you're at. And I found where I was at, and I gathered myself, and I finished the speech. But now, people ask me to keynote. People ask me to do workshops and trainings and webinars, things like that. It's nothing. I can, I got to the place where it's like, you tell me what you want me to talk about, and I will have it ready for you, and we'll knock it out, and we'll do it. I'm a lot more confident in my public speaking. But don't call me up on stage to do a speech, and I didn't know I was going to, I need to be prepared. I'm not an extemporaneous type of speaker. I need to kind of know what's happening. What am I talking about? What's the topic? Give me a heads up. Don't just bring me oh, look, there's Dr. Eakins why don't you say a few words? No, I'm not going to, I'm going to be all jacked up. It's just not who I am. I'm just very private. I'm a very introverted person, but people don't know that. They don't believe that because it's like, I hear your voice all the time. So I just assume that you're like just all everybody mingle, all that kind of stuff. It's just not me.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating because you're right. I would assume that you're outgoing, you're extroverted with the podcast, just the roles that you have had. But what I'm also hearing is this adaptability is a big thing for you. And I'm also hearing that your ability to be prepared gives you the confidence to show up. And then once you're in it, you're thriving. So that's fascinating, learning a little bit more about you. And Sheldon, I'm really interested to hear what led you to want to even create the Leading Equity podcast in the first place.
So I'm representing 0.8% of black people in the state of Idaho, beautiful state of Idaho. And if you've never been to Idaho and you have your own thoughts about potatoes, yes, I know it's a stereotype, but it is a thing. The potatoes is our stuff. That's what we got out here. I mean, and big potatoes, they're huge, football size. It is a deal. It is very common to enter into, let's say you have a lunch or luncheon or meetings and stuff like that, and it'll be a baked potato bar. That is something that I had never seen until I moved here. It's like everybody has a baked potato bar, or there's some sort of potato dish seems to be the highlight of whatever dinner or potluck, whatever I'm going to, right? And as an educator who enters into a predominantly white space, and I had kids of color that would come up to me from time to time and say, this is happening, Sheldon. This happened in class. This happened in the hallways, or this. I was getting stories after stories after stories, and I didn't know how to help them. I had no clue, and I've been a principal before moving out here. I've been in a classroom, all these things, but now I'm in a different position and I'm not even an educator. I am working at the university, but I'm going to the high schools, and I'm helping the kids get to college, and I'm overseeing this program, and I didn't know how to help them. I didn't know the language. I didn't know what stuff was called, and so I decided, you know what? I want to create content, but I don't want to write. I hate writing. I got through my dissertation kicking and screaming.
Same.
And I'm like, I'm done. I'm done writing. I'm not going to blog. I'm not going to do any of these kind of things, but I want to create content. I want to learn how can I be better as an educator? What can I do to support my students? And I went to a principal's conference in Chicago 3 years ago. And I just looking at the different lists of different sessions, and it said Podcasting 101. okay, let me just check this out. Podcasts, I listen to podcasts every now and then, so let me check it out. I go to the session. They literally broke down how to do a podcast. There's equipment you need. Here's a structure. And they did an interview. They interviewed someone right then and there. They published it. They showed the whole process, what tools and all that stuff. I was hooked.
Wow.
I said, that doesn't even look hard. And I said, I want to create podcasts because I sit there and I listen to podcasts, I listen to education podcasts. But you know what I didn't hear? I didn't hear people of color. Definitely wasn't hearing any black folks. And the topics that were being covered was basically how to be a better teacher, how to be a better school leader. And I'm like, there's nothing specific to address students that are not getting the love and the support that they need. This is just basically a lot of general stuff that I'm hearing. Here's the latest strategy to teach, but it wasn't culture response. It was nothing specific. And so I said, okay, I can sit here and complain. I can sit here and be like, oh, there's no people of color. There's no equity stuff. There's nothing that's addressing the stuff that I want to hear. Like, how does this help me when I have a student telling me that my teacher is racist, or I had a classmate tell me, when are you going back to Mexico? Oh, they're building that wall, right? How do I help someone that's dealing with that? That's being, knowing my content is great, but our kids are still human, right? And they have their challenges. They have stuff that they deal with beyond math curriculum and English curriculum and things like that. So what can I do? And so I just ordered, that day after that conference, went on Amazon, ordered the mic that they told me to get, signed up for all the different podcast resources, got my website set up, and then boom, hit record. Like I said, I scripted out my first episode, and after that, I started bringing in guests. I was working out of an institutional higher ed, so I was at the university, so it made sense for me to start looking for professors and finding research articles and just different topics that I wanted to know about selfishly. I was getting guests that I wanted to learn how I could be better in certain situations, and so here we go. 3 years later, we're 200 and I think I just pushed out 216.
Yeah.
Is what was the last episode, and it just has grown. I didn't think anybody was going to listen to it. I never thought it was going to end up being a business. It just was literally a hobby, just a side project to help me be better as an educator. And the next thing I know, people reaching out like, "Hey, I listened to your show." I was like, "Oh, you listened to my show?" I didn't know folks were listening to it like that. And then people asked me to come speak. People asked me to come do trainings. And I guess I'm starting a business now, and I'm going to start a bank account and do all that stuff and get it all together, and here we are.
What's fascinating about that story is just how nonchalant you are about building.
I wasn't expecting it.
And one of the things we talked about before we started shooting is this podcast is new, right? This is going to be episode number 7. And I'm researching top education podcasts. And as I'm looking, one of the top education podcasts is the Leading Equity podcast. And so the fact that when you went to this conference, you go to this random session, and then you're like, I can do that. And then you go do it. You took action. That's really big. And then 216 episodes later, you have one of the top ranked education podcasts. Like, how does that feel?
First of all, shout out to Danny Bauer. Shout out to William Parker and Jethro Jones. They were the ones facilitating that session. And after it was over, they spent the time, and we talked 20, 30 minutes later, after they were done presenting. And they just broke everything down. And they were like, anything you need. And I tell you, I kid you not, Danny Bauer, I can reach out to him. I can text him anytime. He texts me. He checks in on me just because we just developed that rapport from 3 years ago, just because he was doing his thing. And he was like, I want you here too. You need to be having a space. I'm very humbled because again, I produce these episodes for myself. Like the guests that I bring on, I'm bringing them on because I want to know about this topic, or I want to learn more about this. And if I can share it with other people and I can help other people at the same time, that to me is a win-win for everybody. So it feels good. But you told me that stuff. I didn't even know. I don't really check those kind of things. I just, it has come so, it's like muscle memory. Mm-hmm. It's like if you do it 3 years, like every Monday, I'm coming out every Monday. This is my process. I'm spending my Saturday or my Sunday editing a podcast, getting the show notes, getting all that stuff. It's just literally what I have been doing every single week for the last 3 years.
And putting the work in. One of my good buddies from college, he talks about putting out your mixtape, and whatever you're doing, just put it out there. And you have been doing that consistently for the past 3 years. And in that time, you've had 216 episodes, countless guests that you brought on. Sheldon, I'm interested to hear, what has been one of the more memorable conversations with the guests that you've had? What's something that really stands out to you?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that question, because it's coded as what is one of your favorite episodes, which means who's one of your favorite top. It really, okay, I'll break it down. I have kind of a top 5, and it's more on the topic. The delivery from the guests were great as well, but just off the top of my head, I can go off of most popular episodes as well. I have one. Being kind is not the same as being anti-racist, I think, or something like that, with Dr. Terry Watson. I got a lot of downloads from hers. Hedrick Nichols had a really good one. Right when critical race theory stuff was really hitting, she and I jumped on, and hers is very, very well received as well. Michael Dominguez, I was really honored to have him on. And I've had Pedro Noguera on. Wow. Again, they have been, people that I look up to, people that I really are very influential in this work. I have Zaretta Hammond has been on with me before. I've had Bettina Love with me before. I just been very fortunate to have some really folks that I read their book. Like, I literally just got done reading your book, and now I'm interviewing you live. It's an honor to be able to do those things. There's definitely a list of folks that I've been trying. Like, I was sending them I'll send them an invite every 6 months or so, like, hey, can we get this going? And it just hasn't happened yet. But they'll tell me stuff like, I really do appreciate the stuff that you're doing. It's just the timing is always off. But yeah, I definitely have my bucket list. There's just certain topics. Like, some people will ask me, if I've never listened to your show before, and if I'm brand new, if I want to learn, like, what episode would you recommend? And that Michael Dominguez episode where he talks about decolonizing education would be one. Dr. Amy Samuels, she's been on my show twice, and she has some really good information regarding how to have conversations about race in your classroom, what to do if words come up. So again, depending on what you're looking for, she would be one that I would recommend as well. It just really depends on the topic. I always say, what is a topic that you're looking for? Like, where are you struggling? And I can recommend an episode, as opposed to saying, hey, here's my favorite episode. Here's the ones that I really like. Because I really do appreciate all the guests that have been on the show.
Man, you have episodes on episodes on episodes, an entire catalog. Is there a method to selecting the topic? Do you look at the current context of what's happening? Say, I need to get this person or this subject matter expert. What's your process?
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes if, dealing with what's going on in the world, like certain things are hitting, like Stop Asian Hate or Black Lives Matter. So it's kind of, George Floyd, I pushed out a lot of episodes that were centered around police brutality and supporting our students during these hard times. When COVID first hit, I was doing a lot of stuff on like counseling and trauma-informed care and things like that, social-emotional learning that was kind of related to what's going on with the pandemic as it first started coming in. And then from there, I read a lot. And so I will pull up academic journals. There's a journal for equity that I like. There's a journal for multicultural education. There's all these journals that I will pull up and just kind of see what are the latest issues and what are some of the topics. And I'll reach out to the professor, whoever wrote it, and just, hey, can you jump on the show and let's talk about it. Sometimes nowadays, I get hit up a lot to where it's like I don't have to necessarily reach out to people as much. People will reach out to me and say, hey, can I be on your show? I just have this, or here's something that, here's an article they'll share with me. And I'll say, yeah, let's jump on and let's talk about that. So it really just kind of depends. Sometimes I'm just in the mood to learn more about a certain area, like I don't know about. Maybe it's multi-tiered systems of support. And I was like, you know what? I need to brush up on that. Let me reach out to some folks that I know. And after one of the things that you'll learn, Byron, as a podcaster is your network is going to grow like exponentially. Like it's going to be like crazy. Like you're going to be able to say, you know what, I have a person that was on my show, you know, a year ago, and I can reach out to that person to cover this topic. I've had some contracts come in for certain areas, like people will reach out and say, hey, Sheldon, we need some early childhood training done. And I'm like, man, I have at least 3 people that I've had on my show that I'm connected to that I could reach out to and say, hey, I have this contract. Can we work together and let's get this done. And so you'll get that network and you'll just have a bunch of people that over time that you can just reach out, and it's just so beneficial.
Yeah, and I really think that's beneficial because you build up a community, and that's one of the things that I'm going for. That's one of the things that I appreciate about what you've built up is a strong sense of community. And especially with this podcast is having a community where we can have these type of conversations because they're not happening that often, or at least we need a place where we can pull knowledge, we can pull resources, we can tap into people who have expertise in certain areas so that we can propel and move our work forward. Man, if there was one person, the one person that you have to have on the podcast who you've even reached out to, they've been elusive, you know who it is. Like, you have someone. I'm interested to know who that person is that you just have been trying so hard to get on your podcast.
I've been trying to get Gloria Ladson Billings on forever.
Okay.
I reach out to her every now and then, and at one point I heard she was retired, and then she wasn't doing any interviews and things like that. I've had people that have worked with her that knew her or something. I was like, can you connect me? I've tried to get her on. So Gloria Ladson Billings is probably the number one person that I've tried to get on. It just for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened yet. And then Django Parrish is another one that I've been trying to get on. He's culturally sustaining pedagogy is his work. And so I love his book, but I just haven't been able. Again, timing is always there's always something that's going on. I just wasn't able to get him on. And Dina Simmons.
Yeah.
Dina Simmons is another one that I've been trying. It's all love, you know what I'm saying? It's just we just haven't been able to connect. But those 3 are probably are my top 3 folks that if I could get them on, it would just mean so much because I really do respect and value the work that they're doing. I mean, they're putting in those reps, and there's some amazing folks. I know they have some great things to share. 2022
is going to be the year you get your top 3 guests on the Leading Equity Podcast. You heard it here first. It's going to happen.
Yes.
So, Sheldon, you have a major project that's launching fall 2022. So in addition to you getting your 3 guests for 2022, this big project is going to be coming. The Leading Equity, Becoming an Advocate for All Students book by Dr. Sheldon Eakins will be dropping. Man, congratulations on the book deal.
Thank you.
I'm interested to hear a little bit about the book. What was your inspiration for the book? So interested to hear.
It's funny that you say what is the inspiration to the book because I wasn't trying to write a book. I've been offered book deals a few times, and I always would turn it down because my thing I tell them, I say, listen, I podcast for a reason. I don't like to write. Yeah. I don't like this is what I'm doing. I'm not blogging. I'm not writing anything. But it just got to a place where it's like, you know what? They kind of like what we were talking about earlier. You just got an offer that you couldn't turn down. And so I was like, I got to make this happen. And I sat on it. I had a deadline to turn in my draft. And even then I was still kind of, it's not my thing. However, what happened as far as the inspiration behind the book was I had an ebook. It was a very popular ebook, freebie. Whenever you have your own website and you're trying to get leads, it's helpful to be able to get those emails so that you can kind of send them information, things like that. So I had a book that was basically 10, and it's still on my website right now. It's basically 10 steps towards leading equity. And so that was the framework of what the book looks like. It just mainly expanded upon. So there's like these 10 different things, talks about decolonizing your classroom, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, recognizing your privilege, just several different areas that will help any educator at any level on their equity journey to support them in their things. And I really just try to bring in perspectives that folks may not have considered. I've done enough trainings. I've had enough folks that would bring stuff to me or question me about certain topics. I'm like, oh man, I didn't even think about that. Again, when you build that network and you start entering into these spaces, like I talk to folks once or twice a week, like just randomly or either social or via phone or whatever. It's just let's hop on a Zoom. Are you busy? And we just chop it up and just talk about these things. And they're throwing stuff at me and I'm throwing stuff at them. And we're just like the other day, as a matter, I think it was yesterday, a good friend of mine, Dr. Sosan Jabber, she reached out to me and she was like, I have heard that Latinx is not acceptable for a lot of our brown folks. Like there's no X in the Spanish alphabet. And so there's a lot of folks that are saying, you know what, we're pushing back on that and we're Latin A. I had never heard of this terminology. Okay. And we talked for about, I don't know, a few minutes or so, and it just really got me thinking. So now I have an episode topic that I kind of want to see if I can kind of flush out, get somebody that's knowledgeable about that and just have that conversation, because it's not something I had ever thought of. So it's just, again, just building on the knowledge that I have, and again, wanting to share and help as many folks as I can. That's kind of how the book kind of came about. So I am excited about it. The first draft is in. I have more thoughts, some more things I want to add to it. I want this book to be very beneficial. It's primarily for educators, but if you are a school leader, if you are a counselor or another position, it might be as helpful, but it's definitely for our teachers.
Man, congratulations. That's a major thing. And the world is going to benefit from having your thinking on paper that they can always go back to. As we bring this episode to a close, I would love for you to share your advice of what you would give to educators who might be looking to launch their own podcast, their own business venture, or maybe even be interested in writing their own book.
Just do it. I couldn't tell you how many times I've met with people that'll reach out and say, hey, I want to start a podcast. Can I pick your brain? Can you give me some guidance? If I've met with 100 people, I would say 5 of them have started a podcast.
Wow.
I don't know what the issue is as far as because it's not hard. I listened to a show called School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson. And one of the things he always says, it's not hard to make a podcast. It's hard to make a good podcast. And that's something I really started thinking about. I was like, okay, what kind of experience do I want the listener to have? People say, hey, Sheldon, why don't you have like ads and stuff in the middle of your shows? And I'm like, I just don't want to ruin or interrupt someone's experience with a Tide commercial or some Colgate. Like, for me, that has nothing to do with what's going on. I can make some money off of that. Right. But at the same time, that's going to interrupt someone's experience. And so I would always say, this microphone that I'm talking to you on right now is $60. Mm-hmm. And it's the mic that I've been using. Wow. I do have other equipment. I do have another mic that I use that it was like $400. And I'm thinking this is what I needed. But I love this one. I like the way it sounds. It plugs right into my USB, right into my computer. It's simple. So if you're willing to invest, let's just call it $100. If you say, I want to start a podcast, and you're willing to invest $100 to get you set up, get you going, and maybe it costs you $20, $30 a month in the beginning to, maintain the podcast or whatever fees you got to pay, but it's really a small investment. And just be consistent with it, and it will grow, but you have to be patient. No one's going to listen to your first few episodes. That's the reality. No one will. But that gives you time to mess up. It gives you time to figure out, how am I supposed to do this? What's the best podcast? I mean, I've went through different, I used to use Skype. I used to use Clean Feed. I've used Zencaster. I've used Zoom. And I finally settled on Zoom. But I didn't figure all those things out until 50, 60, 70 episodes in. So it's just, again, you just got to figure out what works best for you. What is the best process to streamline yourself so you're not spending 80 hours a week just trying to get one episode out. Load up a bank of shows if you can, so that way you're not struggling for content. And it's not a method of quantity versus quality, but if you have a bank of 10 episodes already good to go, you're set. And so you'll, like, life happens. Sometimes things happen. You get sick, or somebody gets sick, or like just things happen, and you're like, oh man, I'm supposed to come out with an episode, but I have nothing. So just always try to keep a bank of episodes in the can, just ready to go in case something happens, and you're good to go. But none of that will happen if you don't hit record.
There it is, Dr. Sheldon Eakins, the leading equity man of the century. He is doing it. He's crushing it. 216 episodes, and you heard it here first. Just do it. Just get started. That's wisdom that, like you said, if you got 100 people, maybe 5 will take action. So just by taking action, that will put you a lot further ahead than most others. So wisdom noted. Any closing thoughts as we come to a close?
Any closing thoughts? I guess, again, if you're looking for more information as far as being an equity advocate, if you're an educator, definitely encourage you to check out the website, leadingequitycenter.com. We have a lot of resources there, and feel free to subscribe to the podcast as well, Leading Equity.
Yeah, and how can people get in touch with you on social media?
On social, it's so Instagram is Sheldon Eakins, and that's Eakins is my Instagram handle. If you want to connect on Twitter, it's Sheldon L. Eakins, and again, that's Eakins. But those are the main ways to find me online.
Ladies and gentlemen, and whatever you might identify as, you heard it here first. We appreciate you. Thank you for taking this time to have this healing-centered conversation. We appreciate all of our listeners for tuning in to the Healing-Centered Conversations podcast. Be sure to follow Healing Convo Pod across all social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode. Help us grow by liking, sharing, commenting, and leaving a positive review. Tell a friend to tell a friend about the Healing Centered Conversations podcast. Until next time, take care.